Hi there, thanks for tuning in a new video. And in this video I will show you how I made this record cabinet using mahogany sapele, a beautiful wood I never used before. Now lately I like to buy my wood plain and roughly sawn in the length and width that I need. This saves me a lot of preparation time, and if you are interested where I buy this, check the description for the link to his web shop. Keep in mind, if you buy pre-planed, pre-cut, that you might encounter some imperfections. That's why I often buy wood 3mm thicker than I need and a couple of centimeters wider than and longer than needed, so I can fine-tune everything once I know how I will connect it all together. Speaking of connection, I like to use my Domino jointer for this method, and there are a lot of ways to do this, but if you are gonna join your boards together with any of these types of dowels, biscuits or dominoes, I highly recommend measuring it out roughly so you don't get exposed connections when you're gonna cut dovetails in the later stadium of your project. This is super annoying and it can ruin your whole project, so I highly recommend doing that. I like to keep in mind the rule of thumb. If I'm gonna add more than 4 or 5 dominoes in a row, then I like to use this technique. So one side I'm gonna do the tight setting on the domino jointer, and the other side of the board I'm gonna do the middle loose setting on the domino jointer. This way it is super easy to fit them together, and it allows you to do small adjustments when you're gonna glue everything together. So if you have any imperfections, this is covered. Once everything is prepared after the glue up, I start to cut my boards in the right length and width, and herefore I'm using always the same technique, which is the parallel guide and the rail square from Bench UK. This is a super accurate way of working with bigger boards, so you can lay your material flat on your workbench and you can cut it nice, square and even all the same. I always check my edges if they are square, and once everything is prepared I can go over to the next phase, which is cutting dovetails. For this project I will going to add dovetails on the outside of the carcass. For my work I always use the same method. I apply tape on the top, which I cut with my marking gouge. This is very handy because it gives you a straight line that is both visible and feelable, which is super handy in the next step of this process. I take time to align my dovetails properly so they are nicely spaced out across the entire width. For the joints I create 45 degree, as I mentioned before, on the outside edges, so be careful with cutting the tails because you need to leave one tail, so one cutting line away from the edge, which will all make sense later in the video. I've become a big fan of using jigs, and this time I'm using the Cat's Moses 128 jig. It's super accurate, quick and reliable. I've used many different saws in my project, and I can say that Japanese saws work the best for me when it comes down to joinery. They provide excellent control and it feels much easier. It will also give you a really clean result. I'll put a link in the description of the saw that I like the most. The advantages of a fine saw is that you don't need to clean up the sides of your tails. You only need to chisel out the middle part. Therefore I use firstly a coping saw, and then I work my way up with a chisel towards the tape line. What is important is not to chisel too much in one go. Work your way up slowly towards the tape. Ideally you leave 1mm so you can do a final cut with a nice wide chisel that fits almost the entire width of the down part of your tail, and then you have a nice straight line. As I mentioned before, the tape is also very useful for laying out the pins. This way you can gently slide your board over it, creating a nice straight line, and then you can trace it with a knife. And you can do the same thing. You can cut the pins, remove the waste material with a coping saw, and then clean out the middle waste with a chisel. Here it's crucial again, don't take too much in one go, just work your way up slowly towards your tape line. And for the final pass I like to use a really wide chisel for a nice straight line on the bottom side. Alright, the next step is to create 45 degree joints on the outsides. Simply draw a 45 degree line on the corners, roughly saw along this line, then take a chisel and a paring block, clamp that on your board and clean the joints so it is exact 45 degrees, super clean. This is one, super handy when you're gonna do the glue up and it's nicely connected together, then you are sure that it's 90 degrees. Two, it is super nice that it connects together like it should be, so no space between it. A pairing block really is ideal for this operation. After all my dovetails, it was the next step in the process, which is making the dividers. Here I wanted to have tenons, so this time I'm gonna do it differently. I'm gonna use my shaper origin and see if it really is helping me speeding up the process. First, I cut all the holes on my sideboards, which I did on my workbench with this shaper plate, which is super handy, and then I use a station to cut the pins. Now, shaper origin, great machine. What I didn't like is the round corners of my tenon, so I still needed to square up my inside edges, which is not a big thing though, but it's still something that you need to do by hand. Once I was done with all my tenons, dovetails, it is time to do the last thing before the glue up, which is a rabbet on the backside for my back panel. I really like to do this on my router table, so it gives me a good stability, and I can dial in the RPMs on this table so I have a nice clean cut, because this mahogany does splinter very easily, I noticed. So you don't want to go in with router bits too fast. That's my experience so far. And again, I didn't use this lumber that much, so I'm still figuring out what is the best to treat this lumber the correct way so you have a clean result. So yeah, still learning. If you got any tips, just leave a comment below. Now, after that was all done, it was time to glue everything together. And this is, as always, stressful, time consuming, thinking I did a lot of things wrong, but once it was all glued up, once it's all in the clamps, I checked it with my square, and I can luckily say I managed to make a cabinet that is square, fits all together, and looks already really good so far. So I really was happy with the result. The next step in this build, almost the final step, was to create a base frame. Now for the base frame, I implemented a 3-way mitered joint on the outside edges, which complements the mitered dovetail a little bit. Maybe it's my vision, but I really like the way of this joint, how it looks. So make sure you're cutting exact 45° on your table saw. Then it's just simply adding dominoes that are not too big. In this case, my lumber was 40mm thick, and I used 6mm dominoes, so 6x40, and it actually fits well together. Now this glue up was stressful as well, because it needed to be square on all the edges, all the corners, and clamping was quite tricky. I planned to use my bend clamp on this glue up, but I ended up with tons of clamps and jigs, and I even cut it some ply in 45° to connect that on the inside to make sure that my angles are 45° and that maintained with the glue up. So I just added some ply on the inside, which you won't see if everything is prepared and finished. Now I mentioned that I'm gonna make tapered legs after my base is framed. This is also a thing that I like to do. I keep my legs longer than needed, and then I can fine tune them, or with my parallel guides, or on my table saw. This time I use my table saw, which is a handy trick to make your furniture accurate in the end. If you want to have this straight away, and if you got any imperfection with your glue up, you can nothing do about it anymore. And this is just a handy thing that you can implement to make it just a little bit easier. Now it's time to make the last thing correct, which is the tapered legs for this base. As I mentioned, I did that after everything was glued up. So I made a template on my bandsaw, which I fine-tuned with a block planer, and then I added a stop block on the bottom side, which I can screw in my furniture leg, which you won't see again. So I'm able to use a flush trim bit and then just simply copying, pasting this template on all 4 sides. So I have a nice tapered leg, which is all the same. I lost some footage of the last bit because, as you can see, I wasn't able to cut the full length, so the full depth. So after I did the first one, I removed the template and did the second one. So I copied the first line that I did. So the last thing for this base frame was adding a strip that is offset inwards, so that gives a nice shadow line on your furniture. Now it's simply cutting a strip with more than 45° angles on both sides, so it's easy easier to glue it all together and then just simply glue it on your base frame. This gives a really nice look to your furniture base. It doesn't make it chunky and it gives more, I don't know, feeling. Let me know in the comment, what do you think of this? Do you like it, or would you say just put it straight away underneath it? I don't know. Just let me know in the comment your thoughts about this. Now it's finally time to add finish to my project, which is super satisfying to do. The step that I didn't show in this video was sanding it all and preparing it for the finish. If you want to know more about that, please let me know in the comments below, and I'm happy to implement that in my next video. Now for the finish, I use Osmo 3028 top oil, which is a great finish which applies super easily and it dries really quick. It's a natural finish, so it really gives a nice depth to your wood fibers. It protects really well, so I will put a link in the description below. If it is possible, I like to add finish before I install my back panel. This gives me access to all the small corners on the back side. It's just an easy way. After everything is dried up, I just install my back panel, nail it on the back side with an air nailer, and that's it. Now we're gonna enjoy the pictures of this project, and I'm super happy that you made it so far in the video. Really thanks for watching, and hopefully I see you in the next videos. Here are the end result pictures of this project, and if you got any comments or if you want to know anything, just let me know in the comments below, and hopefully I see you guys in the next video.